Just hours ago, something happened in the Middle East that analysts have warned about for decades, but very few believed would actually occur. Iran didn't move through proxies. It didn't operate through militias. It didn't rely on deniability. Instead, it acted directly. Ballistic missiles were launched from Iranian territory, and they landed inside Saudi Arabia. Not symbolic strikes, not warnings, not limited escalation. This was a direct state-to-state attack. And within hours of those impacts, something even more telling happened. Not on the battlefield, but in the skies above the Gulf. One by one, countries across the region made the same decision. The United Arab Emirates closed its airspace. Qatar shut down operations. Kuwait halted incoming and outgoing flights. Bahrain followed immediately. Major airports, global aviation hubs that connect continents, stopped functioning almost simultaneously. Flights were grounded, routes were canceled, air corridors went silent, and none of this required a joint announcement. No emergency summit, no coordinated press release, no multinational directive. Each country acted independently, but they all reached the same conclusion. The threat had changed, and it had changed fast. Because when governments shut down their own airspace, they are making a calculation that keeping the skies open is more dangerous than closing them. That calculation is not made lightly, and it tells you everything about what they believe might happen next. To understand why this moment is so significant, you have to look beyond the missiles themselves, because this isn't just about what was hit, it's about what the strike represents. For decades, Iran and Saudi Arabia have existed in a kind of controlled rivalry. They competed for influence across the region, but always indirectly, in Yemen, in Syria, in Iraq, in Lebanon. Each side used proxies, alliances, and political leverage to push its interests without crossing a critical line. That line was simple: no direct war, no direct strikes from one country onto the other. Because once that line is crossed, everything changes, and today, that line is gone. There's no ambiguity here, no room for interpretation. Missiles were launched from Iran, and they struck Saudi territory. That removes the diplomatic buffer that both sides have relied on for years. Saudi Arabia can no longer treat this as a proxy conflict. It can't frame it as a limited escalation. It has to respond to what it actually is, a direct attack. And that creates a level of pressure that didn't exist before. Now, the most important question is not just why Iran struck, but what it chose to strike. Because targets tell you intent, and intent tells you strategy. According to early assessments, the strikes focused on two critical areas. The first, energy infrastructure. Saudi Arabia is not just another country in the global system. It is one of the central pillars of the global energy market. Its oil facilities are not just national assets. They are global pressure points. When those facilities are disrupted, the impact doesn't stay local. It spreads instantly. Energy prices react. Supply chains tighten. Markets destabilize. And that's exactly why targeting them is so significant. Because this isn't just about damaging Saudi Arabia. It's about sending a signal to the entire world that energy security is no longer guaranteed, that supply can be disrupted, not gradually, but instantly, and that the consequences will be felt far beyond the region. The second category of targets is even more strategic. Airspace control systems, radar installations, communication networks, air traffic coordination infrastructure. These systems don't just manage civilian aviation, they form the backbone of situational awareness in the region. They help track aircraft, monitor missile activity, coordinate responses. When those systems are degraded, the entire air picture becomes less clear. And in a conflict environment, that uncertainty is dangerous because it reduces reaction time. It increases the risk of miscalculation, and it creates gaps that can be exploited. So when you combine these two target sets, energy and airspace, you begin to see the bigger picture. This wasn't a random strike. It was a calculated move designed to create maximum disruption across multiple domains at once. Economic pressure, operational confusion, strategic uncertainty, all triggered simultaneously. Now look at what happened next. The airspace closures. This is where the global impact begins. The Gulf region is one of the most important aviation corridors in the world. Flights between Europe, Asia, and Africa pass through it every day. Cargo moves through these routes. Passengers rely on these connections. Airlines build entire networks around these hubs. When those hubs shut down, the effects ripple outward. Flights are rerouted. Delays stack up. Costs increase. And it doesn't take long for those disruptions to reach other continents. Within 24 hours, the consequences begin to show. Within days, they become unavoidable. Because aviation is not just about travel. It's about logistics. It's about the movement of goods, components, and critical supplies. And when that movement is interrupted, industries feel it. But there's another layer to this, a military layer, because the Gulf region is not just an economic hub, it's also a strategic one. It hosts key military installations. It supports ongoing operations. provides access, positioning, and reach. When airspace closes, it doesn't just affect commercial flights. It affects military mobility, it complicates logistics, it forces adjustments. And those adjustments take time that may not be available in a rapidly escalating situation. This is where the situation becomes even more complex, because every country in the region is now facing the same dilemma. How do you respond to a direct strike without triggering something bigger? Saudi Arabia cannot ignore what happened, but its response carries risk. A strong response could escalate the conflict. A restrained response could invite further pressure, and every option comes with consequences. At the same time, other Gulf countries are watching closely. They are not just observers, they are potential participants, because if the conflict expands, they may not have the option to stay neutral. And that's why their decisions, like closing airspace, matter so much. They are not reacting to what has already happened. They are preparing for what they believe might happen next. Now, let's talk about the global dimension, because this is where the impact becomes impossible to ignore. Energy markets are already sensitive. They respond quickly to uncertainty. And right now, uncertainty is exactly what they are getting. Disruptions to production, concerns about supply routes, rising geopolitical tension. All of these factors push prices upward. But this situation is different, because it's not just one disruption. It's multiple disruptions happening at the same time, and that creates a compounding effect. Prices don't just rise, they accelerate. And once that momentum builds, it becomes difficult to control. This is where governments around the world start to feel the pressure. Fuel costs increase, transportation becomes more expensive, production costs rise, and those increases eventually reach consumers. At the same time, political pressure builds, because economic stability is directly tied to public confidence, and when that stability is threatened, leaders are forced to act. Which brings us to the most important question of all. What happens next? Because this moment is not just about a single strike, it's about what that strike makes possible. If direct attacks between major regional powers are now on the table, then the range of potential targets expands, and the threshold for escalation lowers. That doesn't mean immediate full-scale war, but it does mean the rules have changed. The boundaries that once limited actions are no longer as clear, and that creates a new kind of risk. So when you look at everything together, the strikes, the targets, the airspace closures, the global reaction, you start to see the bigger picture. This is not an isolated event. It's a shift in how this conflict is being fought, a shift in how countries are responding, and a shift in what the future might look like. Because once a line like this is crossed, it's very difficult to redraw it, and every decision that follows is shaped by that reality. The next move matters, not just for the region, but for the world.